Hi everybody. Well, we'll read another chapter of The Adventures of Grandfather Frog. There he is on his lily pad in the Smiling Pool. Now first of all, let's see. Hello to Jackson in Maine. Hi Jax. And Matthew and Marjorie and Emma, all in Maine. Malia and Lucas in Missouri. Hello to Kai Ming and Ru Kai in Washington State. And Hope here in Maine. Hi Hope. And let's see, Dylan in Maine and Lucas in Maine. And Leslie and Mary, our dear friends over in England. And Ezzy and Indy in Oklahoma. And Kayla here in Maine. Hi Kayla. Let's see, Sylvia, Macy, and Lillian in Maine. Hopper and Judson in Maine. And Caden and Xander here in Maine. Evangeline and Isaac in Rhode Island. And Mabel way over in the country of China, not the town of China, Maine. Okay, now let's see. This is to Bert, because he knows he's a friend of Mabel's, and Jackson, and well, actually everybody. Our old John Deere tractor here at the farm put water in the radiator after the long winter today and started it up. Started up easily after all went along. The 1937 John Deere, Model B, one of the great ones. Okay, now let's see, folks. We're going to read today. I have to say something to my friend Harry, otherwise known as Sonny. Sonny, Roxy told me about your comment about last night's reading. And, well, I'll try to do better today. I'm not in the mood to yawn as much as I was last night, so let's hope. Okay, chapter 22. Grandfather Frog's Troubles Grow. Wow. Now, we're almost at the end of the book, so he's got to get straightened out at some point, I hope. Okay. Now, the little saying at the beginning of the chapter is, head first in, no way out. It's best to know what you're about. Words to the wise, huh? Okay. Grandfather Frog had had plenty of time to realize how very true this is. As he sat on the old shingle, which the merry little breezes had blown into the spring where he was a prisoner, he thought a great deal about that little word, if. Just a moment, folks. Let's go back to that picture for a second. And there's the shingle that he's sitting on that the merry little breezes blew in there for him. Lucky they did that. It must make it easier for him. If he hadn't left the Smiling Pool, if he hadn't been stubborn and set in his ways, if he hadn't been in such a hurry, if he had looked to see where he was leaping, well, any one of these ifs would have kept him out of his present trouble. It really wasn't so bad in the spring. That is, it wouldn't have been so bad but for the fear that Farmer Brown's boy might come for a drink and find him there. That was Grandfather Frog's one great fear, and it gave him bad dreams whenever he tried to take a nap. He grew cold all over at the very thought of being caught again by Farmer Brown's boy. And when at last one of the merry little breezes hurried up to tell him that Farmer Brown's boy actually was coming, poor old Grandfather Frog was so frightened that the merry little breeze had to tell him twice to hide under the old shingle as it floated on the water. At last he got it through his head, and drawing a very long breath, he dived into the water and swam under the old shingle. He was just in time. Yes, sir, he was just in time. If Farmer Brown's boy hadn't been thinking of something else, he certainly would have noticed the little rings on the water made by Grandfather Frog when he dived in. But he was thinking of something else, and it wasn't until he dipped a cup in for the second time that he even saw the old shingle. "Hello," he exclaimed. "That must have blown in since I was here yesterday. We can't have anything like that in our spring." Whoa, whoops. With that, he reached out for the old shingle, and Grandfather Frog, hiding under it, gave himself up for lost. But the anxious little breeze had been watching sharply, and the instant he saw what Farmer Brown's boy was going to do, he played the old trick of snatching his hat from his head. The truth is, he couldn't think of anything else to do. Farmer Brown's boy grabbed at his hat, and then, because he was in a hurry, had other things to do, he started off without once thinking of the old shingle again. Whew, wow, that was close. "Chug-a-rum!" cried Grandfather Frog, as he swam out from under the shingle and climbed up on it. That certainly was a close call. If I have many more like it, I certainly shall die of fright." Nothing more happened for a long time, and Grandfather Frog was wondering if it wouldn't be safe to take a nap when he saw peeping over the edge above him 2 eyes. They were greenish-yellow eyes, and they stared and stared. Grandfather Frog stared and stared back. He just couldn't help it. He didn't know who they belonged to. He couldn't remember ever having seen them before. He was afraid, yet somehow he couldn't make up his mind to jump. He stared so hard at the eyes that he didn't notice a long, furry paw slowly, very slowly, reaching down towards him. Nearer it crept and nearer. Then suddenly it moved like a flash. Grandfather Frog felt sharp claws in his white and yellow waistcoat. Before he could even open his mouth to cry "Chug-a-rum," he was sent flying through the air and landed on his back in the grass. Pounce! 2 paws pinned him down, and the greenish-yellow eyes were not an inch from his own. They belonged to Black Pussy, Farmer Brown's cat. Whoa, a cat. And that's the end of that chapter. Now let's see. The next chapter is chapter 23. Let's see how many more. That's the last chapter of the book. Now, Roxy, should I stop and start over again for the last chapter, or to keep on reading?
I think you should just keep right on.
Oh, okay. Folks, we're going to read the last chapter of the book, chapter 23, The Dear Old Smiling Pool Once More. This might have a happy ending, huh? Black Pussy was having a good time. Grandfather Frog wasn't. It was great fun for Black Pussy to slip a paw under Grandfather Frog and toss him up in the air. It was still more fun to pretend to go away, but to hide instead. And the instant Grandfather Frog started off, to pounce upon him and cuff him and roll him about. That's what cats do with mice they catch sometimes, isn't it? But there wasn't any fun in it for Grandfather Frog. In the first place, he didn't know whether or not Black Pussy liked frogs to eat, and he was terribly frightened. In the second place, Black Pussy didn't always cover up her claws, and they pricked right through Grandfather Frog's white and yellow waistcoat and hurt, for he is very tender there. At last, Black Pussy grew tired of playing, so catching up Grandfather Frog in her mouth, she started along the little path from the spring to the long lane. Grandfather Frog didn't even kick, which was just as well, because if he had, Black Pussy would have held him tighter, and that would have been very uncomfortable indeed. "It's all over, and this is the end," moaned Grandfather Frog. "I'm going to be eaten now. Oh, why did I ever leave the Smiling Pool?" Just as Black Pussy slipped into the long lane, Grandfather Frog heard a familiar sound. It was a whistle, a merry whistle. It was the whistle of Farmer Brown's boy. It was coming nearer and nearer. A little bit of hope began to stir in the heart of Grandfather Frog. He didn't know just why, but it did. Always he had been in the greatest fear of Farmer Brown's boy, but now, well, if Farmer Brown's boy should take him, he might get away from him as he did before. But he was very sure he never could get away from Black Pussy. The whistle drew nearer. Black Pussy stopped. Then she began to make a queer whirring sound deep down in her throat. "Hello, Black Pussy, have you been hunting? Come here and show me what you've got," cried a voice. Black Pussy arched up her back and began to rub against the legs of Farmer Brown's boy. And all the time, the whirring sound in her throat grew louder and louder. I think that pussycat is purring, don't you? Farmer Brown's boy stooped down to see what he had in her mouth. "Why," he exclaimed, "I do believe this is the very same old frog that got away from me." "You don't want him, Puss. I'll just put him in my pocket, take him up to the house by and by." With that, he took Grandfather Frog from Black Pussy and dropped him in his pocket. He patted Black Pussy, called her a smart cat, and then started on his way, whistling merrily. It was dark and rather close in that pocket, but Grandfather Frog didn't mind this. It was a lot better than feeling the sharp teeth and claws all the time. He wondered how soon they would reach the house, and what would happen to him then. After what seemed a long, long time, he felt himself swung through the air, then he landed on the ground with a thump that made him grunt. Farmer Brown's boy had taken off his coat and thrown it down. The whistling stopped. Everything was quiet. Grandfather Frog waited and listened, but not a sound could he hear. Then he saw a little ray of light creeping into his prison. He squirmed and pushed, and all of a sudden he was out of the pocket. The bright light made him blink. As soon as he could see, he looked to see where he was. Then he rubbed his eyes with both hands and looked again. He wasn't at Farmer Brown's house at all. Where do you think he was? Why, right on the bank of the Smiling Pool. A little way off was Farmer Brown's boy fishing. "Chug-a-rum!" cried Grandfather Frog, and it was the loudest, gladdest chug-a-rum that the Smiling Pool had ever heard. "Chug-a-rum!" he cried again, and with a great leap he dived with a splash into the dear old Smiling Pool, which smiled more than ever. And never again has Grandfather Frog tried to see the great world. He is quite content to leave it to those who like to dwell there. And since his own wonderful adventures, he has been ready to believe anything he is told about what happens there. Nothing can surprise him, not even the astonishing things that happen to Chatter the Red Squirrel, about which it takes a whole book to tell. The end. Well, everyone, we finished The Adventures of Grandfather Frog by Thornton W. Burgess. And we'll start a new book soon, probably tomorrow. I'm not sure which one yet. Okay, bye everybody.